Well, speaking of I don't know how, hearsay, legend. I know actually after our recording session, me and Robert got talking a little bit as I was breaking down the equipment, and you had reference, we kind I forgot how we necessarily got to this point, but then we kind of got into or you brought up the notion of how sometimes um, I don't know, the perceived or like the legend of someone, it could be more important than the uh, actual person.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
so
Why don't you explain exactly how or
so
like what made you
how
start
I
thinking about
arrived at
that?
this idea.
Yeah.
So
How did you get to this idea?
so recently, I've been watching some videos by a guy by the name of Stefan Molyneux. I don't know if anyone out there knows who he is, but he has a variety of different like videos that he does, and he had a whole series, and I think he still does this series. It's called the Truth About series, and sometimes he'll talk about certain historical figures. Sometimes it even like it doesn't necessarily need to be like like he could go as to Aristotle. uh Hell, he even did one on David Letterman, for God's sake. So I mean it's really, he did one on Charles Manson, which was really interesting. um but the one that really kind of caught my attention was his Truth About George Washington episode, and it was a fairly long one. And now, some of the stuff that I knew about him just from because I like that period of history, and so learning about some what we would deem as the founding fathers, I find interesting. So learning about them is interesting. And but it's been a while. I'll be honest, it's been a while since I've studied about George Washington, and just going back and like kind of going through some of these things is you look in Washington. Well, he's still. I wouldn't necessarily categorize him as a great man, but uh, and if you look at the other founding fathers of our country, he was not really a huge part, in a sense, like as far as like the ideas and the formulation of the country. He was not really in part of that, but he was, kind of in his own right. He was very politically savvy, for one. I'll give him that. As a as a general, he was not it took him a while for him to get his to get going, because he had a lot of losses, even uh, when he was a soldier for the Brits, uh, and
Oh yeah,
even
that's right. That's
as
right.
and even as the general of the Continental Army, it took a while for there to even be some sort of remote success. And even the success he did have was kind of like happenstance. It was by luck. Almost this like weird, dumb dumb luck, or some would say God ordained, luck. And so in the sense, it's like and I remember reading about this stuff, not and by learning the truth about the truth of someone like George Washington. Obviously, we know like some of the mythology behind him, and even in his day, those successes mythologized him in his own time period, and he was so, for the most part, very well respected, well received, and people saw him. He was the figurehead of this very young country, and it brought to mind another Simpsons reference time, an episode of The Simpsons called Lisa the Iconoclast, in which she's studying it's like the bicentennial of the town of
Right, the founding,
Springfield,
yeah, the founding
and
of Springfield.
right, which is was founded by a guy named Jebediah Springfield, and Lisa, in her work to on an essay that she's doing about Jebediah Springfield, discovers that he was not who he said he was. He was actually, he was a pirate and all this stuff, and it was all the stuff that uh, was talked about and that everyone like saw. It was all a lie. He had become a mythological figure in a lot of ways. So, and in her pursuit of the truth, and when she was about ready, she had all the evidence, and she was about to reveal all of that to the people. She looked around and
Uh,
saw like what.
well, I mean, let me just jump in real fast. And well, she was at first she did try to like inform people about this, and and she met some like resistance, and um, even Mose is like the most cantankerous character on maybe after Grandpa Simpson was like disgusted at her what's the word I'm looking for, her proposition that Jebediah
Yeah,
Springfield was anything less than a hero.
right. Well, and here, well, the your hero phobia disgusts me.
Yeah.
But no, it was, but she wasn't trying to reveal it yet to the whole town. It was more to like certain groups to try to
Right,
like
right.
get
She was like,
get the word
yeah,
out there.
slowly but sure, like, yeah, and with like, with Homer's help, she like, I think like one of the first groups she tried was, all the guys at Moe's Tavern, which then led to Moe being like, you sicken me, get it, get out.
Yeah. Um, but like, and I think at the end when the evidence in place and more prominent backing of her evidence, and she was given a platform to go up and say the truth, but she saw how like the legend of Jebediah Springfield had brought everyone together.
Mm-hmm,
And
mm-hmm,
I think, and like it not only did it bring them together, but it made them better. It unified everybody. And that's kind of like how I feel about some of the things about George Washington, because there's a lot of stuff that's mythologized about him, yet at the
mm-hmm.
same time it brought so many people together. And it's and when Lisa was asked by I forget the character's name. It was voiced by Donald Sutherland, but he was
Oh
like,
yeah,
why did
he was like the caretaker or like the historian
um
of
yeah,
the Springfield like historical society, I believe it was.
right, where the dead comes where the dead comes alive,
Yeah.
metaphorically. But he was like, well, why didn't you tell them the truth? It's like, because the myth of Jebediah Springfield has value too. And
Mm-hmm.
it just like that whole watching that whole thing, and then it just brought to mind that idea of from that Simpsons episode. And I think what Lisa said is very true. Sometimes the legend of someone, while we know the truth, the legend of that person has a lot of value in it as well.
Mm-hmm.
um and I don't know, like I think it's important to understand the our important historical figures.
Mm-hmm.
um I mean, I think if you look at the Bible sometimes, and our quote unquote biblical heroes are very human and flawed,
Oh yeah,
yet
absolutely. I
we
mean,
also revere them.
right. I mean, I think one of the biggest examples would be King David. Um,
Yeah,
he at first, he was a youth, and he was, a man. He was described as a man after God's heart. Um, he stood up to the the Goliath, the giant Goliath, and prevailed. He was loyal to Saul, and Saul turned against him, and then he became king, and then he then went and took another man's wife and killed him over it. Um,
Yeah.
you know, uh, you know, a very a flawed character, but yet he's David is still revered as someone again as he was the moniker that he was given a man after God's heart.
And in a lot of ways, like it's not necessarily like legend, because the guy exists.
Mm-hmm.
But I think there's a lot of times where we don't always look at the bad of King David, but we're inspired by the good in him.
Right, right.
And by looking at what he did well, it inspires us to be better. And I think that has a lot of value in it.
Mm.